Alright, quickly before this video starts, I just want to start this off by saying that this video is extremely special to me. Reason being that before I ever actually fully uploaded my first YouTube video, this was one of the very first thumbnails that I ever thought of. In my head, even when I was like 14, 15, I thought that the Max Steel powers in the My Hero Academia universe would be sort of a perfect fit. And for a character like Izuku, I was just like, man, that's tough. But I never ended up fully making the idea, and it was because of two reasons. One, I was never quite sure how you guys as the audience would take it, just considering the fact that it was like a Disney XD show, so I'm not sure how many of you guys even know about it, so I was just sitting there just unsure about it. But after finally being commissioned to do this video, I have quite literally the perfect excuse, but genuinely still, it would mean the absolute world to me if you guys could pour love and support to this video, because this is just one of those that I've been wanting to do for, I can't even tell you guys how long. But with no further ado, if you guys go on to enjoy part 1, leave a like. There will be no like goal, but I would really appreciate one, and enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Story by zooming into the aftermath of Izuku being bullied by Bakugo, him picking up his notebook as he would say, "Damn Bakugo, don't you know that if I actually went through with it, you'd be held liable?" Beginning to walk through the tunnel, making his way home. This is when out of nowhere, Izuku would turn around feeling something tugging at his leg when he would watch this gigantic green sludgy monster beginning to take form behind him, questioning, "Hey kid, mind if I borrow your body?" Beginning to wrap itself around Izuku, all the while the boy would struggle trying to grasp out of it, but nothing. This is when Izuku's mind would start racing, and as multiple thoughts of death would finally hit his mind, and tears would start pouring out of the boy's face at the thought that he never even got to try to become a pro, suddenly his heart would start beating faster than ever, and the quirk that the boy was actually born with would finally activate, it culminating in a massive explosion of blue energy that would send the sludge villain splattering here, there, and there. This is when suddenly All Might would arrive just on cue, manhole cover plopping out as All Might would say, "I am here?" Staring at the scene of a young boy who's on the ground, all the while the sludge villain that he was chasing was already dispersed as though he had already thrown a punch. All Might walking towards him, the coughing Izuku, questioning him on what took place. Izuku looking up to see the feet of All Might and almost immediately running backwards. All Might, it's you," he would say. All Might looking towards him with confusion as he would say, "Young man, were you responsible for this?" Izuku looking at All Might, kind of just still feeling groggy from that explosion of turbo energy that had finally manifested. Mind you, that was a bizarrely large amount of turbo energy, and had it not been for the sludge villain, Deku might have actually died, because it sort of tanked the explosion power behind the turbo energy that had pretty much been storing up within Izuku for the last 14 years. So with Izuku looking towards All Might and kind of like rubbing his eyes together, he would explain that he's not sure, that 1 second he was within the sludge villain thinking it was it, and then he was on the ground coughing for breath. All Might at this moment would ask what his quirk was, that maybe he used that unconsciously, but Deku would say that he's quirkless, until suddenly blue swirls of energy would surround Izuku, and the boy would stare at his hands going, "What's happening to me?" All Might staring at the boy as he would say, "Maybe you're unlocking your quirk?" Suddenly coughing as he would go, "Well kid, I appreciate you for taking care of the sludge villain," picking up some little bits and pieces of the goop before jumping off. Izuku not even having an opportunity to latch onto him or ask, "Is it possible for me to become a hero?" because All Might straight up had to get going since his time limit was about to end. So with Izuku now kind of just being left there wondering what's going on with him, this is when Izuku would pretty much put that at the back of his mind, thinking that he needs to make his way to the quirk doctor, excited as ever because regardless of what this power is, now he has a power. And that's more Izuku could have ever asked for. So with him walking home happy as ever, the sludge incident with Bakugo never happening, Deku would walk by a nearby construction site when suddenly a robotic creature would come flying towards him, going, "Permission to assimilate?" Izuku looking at it as he would go, "What?" and Steel would literally latch onto his chest and proceed to pretty much merge with Deku. It's in this moment that as Izuku would open his eyes and look at his hands, he would be covered in an armor-like suit. The people on the street all staring at him as somebody would throw a can at Deku going, "You're not allowed to use your quirk in public!" Deku kind of freaking out as he would yell out, "I'm sorry!" running towards a nearby alleyway. This is when Izuku would ask, "What are you? And what are you doing to me?" With Steel telling him that his name is Steel. And to stop freaking out for a second, he has a lot of explaining to do. Izuku in this moment would say, "What? How am I supposed to not freak out?" As Steel would say, "Cool it, kid." This is when suddenly he would pause and Steel would finally explain everything. "Look, as crazy as this is gonna sound, my name is Steel and I'm essentially an alien. I was supposed to stay asleep, that is until your turbo energy awoke me." Turbo energy? What's that? Deku would ask, is that my quirk? Steel just going, I'm getting deja vu. This is when Steel would go on to explain that whatever quirk, as he wants to call it, or power he's generating, is essentially energy that powers Steel. It's like food for him, and they need each other. Going on to explain that Steel has some properties that can be helpful for him, and he can provide him food, and some entertainment, possibly. This is when Deku would ask why he chose him, and Steel would reiterate going, "Kid, it's because you have turbo energy." Izuku being like, "Yeah, but what is that?" Steel going on to explain how turbo energy works and how it powers him as an Ultra Link. Deku finally sort of kind of beginning to understand it would say, "So my quirk is producing energy?" Steel telling him, "Yeah, something like that." Going on to explain to Izuku that without him, he'll die. Deku going, "What? I don't want to die." As Steel would say, "And you won't, because thanks to me being on your chest, you'll never have to worry about that again." Deku looking at him as he would ask where he comes from, Steel telling him that that's not important. But what is important is that now Izuku can finally go on to become a hero of sorts. Deku looking at him and saying, "Wait, you mean it? With a quirk like this, I can become a hero?" Steel just being like, yeah, you can become a hero, you can become a power symbol, whatever you want. Now, let's go home. Steel saying this as he would activate Izuku's flight mode and fly him straight to his house. Deku freaking out, almost similar to that Blue Beetle scene if you guys have seen that movie, with Izuku arriving crashing dead into his parking lot, Deku asking Steel what was that for? Steel explaining that that was a taste of what they can do together. Izuku looking at him as Steel would detach himself floating nearby Izuku, and he would say, "Whoa, so by having you by my side, I can use different costumes like that?" Steel saying, "Modes, it's modes." As Izuku would look at him and go, "Right, modes." Steel looking at him and saying, "Kid, you don't have a single backbone in your body, do ya?" Izuku rubbing the back of his head as he would say, I wouldn't say all that." As Steel would say, "Come on, let's just go get you some food." Deku entering the house with Steel introducing himself to Inko saying, "Nice to meet ya. Name's Steel, and starting today, I'm part of your son's quirk." Inko looking at Steel and smiling, saying, "Wait, Izuku, is this really true? You have a quirk?" Deku looking at his mom as generating some turbo energy, he would say, "Looks like it." And she would say, "Oh, we gotta take you to the quirk doctor right now." So immediately they make their way there, and after checking the quirk factor, Izuku would be confirmed as a late bloomer, being told that his quirk is called Generator. Steel inside Deku's head going, "No, turbo energy." With Izuku saying, excuse me, can we change the name of the quirk to turbo energy?" The doctor looking at him and saying, "I don't see why not," as he would change the status of Izuku's quirk, and Izuku would finally have Steel unbound from his body. Steel introducing himself, as Izuku would go on to explain that his quirk has a little bit of sentience. The doctor saying, "Whoa, those are rare nowadays, but they are becoming more common," jotting that down in his notes, with Izuku eventually making his way home and asking Steel a gazillion questions. Steel answering as many as possible, with Izuku getting the gist of the fact that a long time ago, when Steel was merged with somebody else by the name of Max, there were these things called Ultralinks, which ultimately Max ended up handling, and now because of that, he's here. Izuku would smile, saying he must have been an incredible hero. Steel saying he was his best buddy. Izuku saying that he hopes to become even half the man that Max was. Steel replying by saying, "Well, you can try, kid," with Izuku smiling. This is when we would jump cut to the next day, Steel waking him up almost as though he was like a freaking army sergeant being like, "Wake up, wake up, wake up." Deku going, "Oh, what's happening?" And Steel would say, "It's time to train, and we've got 3 hours before school starts. With that weak little body of yours, you'll hardly generate any turbo energy. We've got to get you fit and up and running. So this is when Izuku, groggy as ever, would begin doing this routine every day, doing a bit of hardcore exercise prior to school, and taking his dietary very, very serious, resulting in a much more fit Izuku that we would get by the end of the 10 months, with Steel helping him out very, very much so, and the fact that now he has turbo energy, his training would just be supercharged, with Izuku also learning a plethora of different turbo modes that he has, learning the turbo base mode, which essentially just amplifies most of his stats, offers reflexes, agility, and all that normal stuff. Then we got turbo strength mode, which Izuku loves. It gives him, strength. Turbo flight mode, which, kind of says it in the name. And then we got turbo scuba mode, which Izuku would definitely work on, considering that most of his training would be held right by a beach. So Izuku would be pretty damn talented when it comes to fighting underwater. And he would also be equipped with turbo speed mode, which, kind of says it in the name, with him lastly having the turbo camouflage mode, which is essentially a mode that makes his armor look like normal clothes. It's kind of like a hologram, because at all times, Izuku actually comes with that base mode armor. Since from the moment that Izuku assimilated with Steel, that armor was now never coming off. So with that said, we now zoom in on Izuku, who'd be doing a bit of training in the water, going whoa-ho, jumping out of it, Steel telling him, you've gotten a whole lot stronger, kid. Maybe you might turn out to be half as cool as Max was. Izuku looking at his watch as he would say, crap, Steel, we're gonna be late. There's 5 minutes for us to get to the examination area. Steel telling him that it's no problem, as Steel would activate flight mode, taking him there immediately. Deku going, we're not supposed to do this, remember? I could get in trouble. Steel telling him, it's this or you're not passing that test. So with Izuku landing right in front of Uraraka, kind of just awkwardly being, hi, Uraraka would say, hi? Izuku making his way inside and taking the test, as he would ace it much like you would expect, and then finally make his way to the robot portion, where Izuku would start kind of freaking out internally, going, crap, this is all getting real all of a sudden. I have to fight against real robots, he would think. Steel telling him to calm down and to just put his training to use, saying that Max wasn't half as much of a coward, and he was actually fighting something trying to kill him. Deku saying, Steel, that's not very encouraging. Steel saying, and you know what? It's not very encouraging to have a partner that's a scaredy cat. Deku just thinking, I hope I don't die, with Ida walking towards him and being like, hey, you're being very distracting to all the other participants. Izuku looking at him as he would apologize, Ida telling him that it's weird to just sit there talking to himself, to use his inner voice, with Izuku noting that Ida was low-key right because everyone was staring. This, however, is when things would be interrupted by President Mike, who would say, go, 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 there's no countdowns in a real fight. All the students lunging towards the direction of all the robots, with Izuku going, whoa, they've all gotten ahead of me, and they're so fast. Steel sighing and saying, kid, we'll show them who's faster. Izuku going, oh right, turbo speed mode, as suddenly his body armor would shift and the normal clothes he was wearing would turn into a suit of armor, allowing Izuku to run even faster than Ida, 10 times that in fact. Izuku blitzing towards the robot that the first contestant was about to take, him running right by it. Steel going, what? Why don't you take it out? Izuku saying they were going for it, and he would say, come on kid, get your head in the game. If you don't impress these heroes, you'll never become one yourself. Deku locking in as he would say, you're right. Jumping into the air, she would say, turbo, strength mode. Lunging up into the air as becoming this gigantic armored version of himself, he would lunge towards the direction of a rinky-dinky one-pointer, punching it as he would send it crashing into the building, exploding on contact. This is when Izuku, realizing that he is just leagues and leagues above these robots, would proceed to wreak havoc on them, garnering a grand total of 86 robot points by the end of 7 minutes, with Steel in his head going left, right, punch, kick. Izuku following Steel's directions to a T until eventually the ground would start shaking. Steel going, that doesn't sound good. This is when Izuku would look up and would see the gigantic robot that is the Zero Pointer, Steel detaching himself from Deku as he would look at him and say, look kid, now you've got 2 choices. You can turn tail and run like everyone else, or you can show this school who Izuku Midoriya is. Deku looking at the robot, and through fear, he would say, let's do it, Steel. Steel going, attaboy, as Izuku would look towards that direction and suddenly spot that a girl was in danger. Izuku instantly kicking into overdrive and saying, turbo, speed mode, blitzing towards the direction of Rock and grabbing her by the arm as removing all the rubble up off of her. He would be gone before the 0-pointer would take a step, and with Izuku taking her to a safe distance, Izuku would then rush back in, 0-pointer barely having the chance to lift its leg back up, as Izuku using his speed mode would literally run up the robot, eventually jumping into the air as he would say, turbo, strength mode, reeling his fist back and smashing a punch so diabolically powerful into the face of the 0-pointer, sending it crashing backward, much like the canonical punch. Everybody watching on as Izuku's incredible strength would have been on full showcase. With Izuku going, alright Steel, flight mode, Steel saying, you're not gonna like this kid, but you're out of juice. Izuku beginning to fall down to the ground with Steel saying, tuck and roll kid, tuck and roll. Deku doing just that, as landing on the ground, Deku would get up with barely any damage. Deku asking Steel why he didn't warn him he was low on turbo energy. Steel saying that he thought if he did, he probably wouldn't have fought the robot. Izuku saying, I wouldn't have. I would have just saved the girl. Steel saying, but think about how much cooler we looked. With everybody staring at Deku and him looking around being like, this is when the crowd would erupt into cheers saying, dude, you're incredible. You're a guaranteed top 10 pro hero in the future at bare minimum. Deku receiving praise from multiple people, with Recovery Girl coming through and saying, get out of the way, get out of the way. She would meet Izuku's eyes and suddenly she would ask if he's okay. Him nodding as she would say, good. Now take this and run along. Izuku accepting a little lollipop from her as making his way home, Izuku would have made his official debut, which obviously would have impressed the heroes and led to a very, very prompt acceptance letter, with Izuku being summoned to his old middle school by the principal, who pretty much just wants to brag about the fact that this year, not only do they have one student joining UA, but 2! So with the teacher praising both students, this is when he would leave them alone in the room. Bakugo giving Deku a death stare, Izuku just being like, Steel, what do I do? Steel telling him to show him who's boss. Deku saying, I can't do that, he's my childhood friend. Bakugo just simply saying, and what exactly are you muttering over there, nerd? Deku being like, nothing, as the meeting would end, and this is when both students would finally be left outside. Bakugo in this moment would attempt to press Deku, however, Steel telling Deku that he's an idiot for just allowing this to happen would take control of Izuku, tapping into flight mode as he would disappear. Bakugo watching on in horror and anger as he would be pissed that Deku had hidden this quirk from him so long. This is when Deku would arrive home and would be freaking out, just thinking, what's Bakugo gonna do to me when he gets his hands on me? Steel telling him to calm down, that from his scans, he's much, much stronger than that boy. Deku telling him, yeah, but he's not about to go beating people up. Steel telling him that it would be good for him. It might make him a bit of a tough guy. Deku saying, and what if I don't want to be one? As Steel would pretty much like roll his eyes, not that he could, but pretty much end up lecturing Deku and telling him not to act like such a coward. Izuku apologizing for the way that he's acting right now, as we would then jump cut to the next day, which would mark the first day of UA, Izuku walking into the classroom as he would take note of all of his surroundings, noticing that Bakugo's there. A stiff-armed and stiff-legged Izuku would suddenly walk into the classroom, Bakugo staring daggers at him, until Uraraka would break the tension in the room going, Armor Boy! This is when looking towards Izuku, she would thank him for saving her. Deku practically wanted to thank her for saving him from this tense situation, as suddenly everything would be broken up by Aizawa, and we would now have the quirk apprehension test stuff happening. This is when Aizawa, telling them all to quiet down, would go on to tell them that for all their lives they've been told to hold back and act ordinary. But that's all about to change, because at this school, they're gonna clearly see who the strongest and weakest is. And today specifically, they're gonna see if they're truly worth of being at UA, as he would toss a ball towards Deku, telling him to demonstrate by tossing that ball as hard as he possibly could, warning Deku not to hold back. This is when Steel would smile, saying that he likes the way that this teacher operates, as Izuku, making his way towards the front of the class, would suddenly think to himself, so Steel, what should we go with? Strength mode? Steel nodding, as Izuku would do just that. Turbo, strength mode, as he would suddenly become large and everybody would watch on, Bakugo most of all, being pissed. Huh? He has more? Deku grasping the ball as he would toss it, actually going on to beat Bakugo's score and getting second in the class for the distance ball throw, pissing off Bakugo, who doesn't think that he could even get half of that, him rushing towards Izuku in an attempt to attack him. This, however, is when Aizawa would stop that in its tracks, and Deku would practically be thanking the man from within, with Steel calling him a coward. This is when Deku, though feeling a bit awkwarded out because Bakugo was literally trying to beat him up, although while the rest of the class was hyping him up, saying his quirk is incredible, Deku would be sitting there not knowing what side he should believe. Should he feel like the weakling he's always been, or should he feel like his new man? Steel telling him that if he wants his opinion, he should act like a new man. Izuku attempting to do this and being a little awkward at it. This would lead to the grip string test, with Izuku absolutely shattering that thing, the standing long jump, Izuku once again using his strength mode to clear the sandbox, and the repeated side to side steps, Izuku using his speed mode to just absolutely outdo the competition, followed by his base mode, which greatly enhances his stat, which he would be using to do the remaining 3 tests, leading Izuku to actually being first in the leaderboard, shocking everybody, especially Izuku, who still has yet to adjust to the fact that he's no longer weak little Deku. And with that being the case and the day finally being over, Bakugo would simply walk by Deku silently, no shoulder bump, no nothing, leaving Deku to just wonder what's going on with him, because while he was walking by him, Deku low-key cowered in fear, but when he was gone, Deku would be confused. Steel saying that he probably realized who the big dog is now, telling Izuku that it's high time he does the same. Izuku looking at Steel as he would say he doesn't feel like that. This, however, is when we would jump cut to the next day of school, them all being in class, when suddenly All Might would barge through the door going, "I am here!" coming in like a normal person. Everybody getting excited, with Deku most of all, seeing as, remember, this is his favorite hero of all time, and in this timeline he doesn't have the same relationship with All Might, so finding out that the symbol of peace is training him would practically lead Izuku to almost passing out. This is when All Might would go on to reveal to the class their costumes, and after us getting a little suit up scene, we would have everybody in the class being divided into groups, where All Might would tell them that now they're going to be seeing what their combat abilities are. Deku being confused, so they're going to throw us into the fire? Steel saying that that's the best form of training, although All Might would finish explaining, and Bakugo would select the ball that would directly pair both of them against each other. This would cause Izuku to quite literally audibly gulp, and Steel to sit there smiling, well, that is if he could, telling Izuku that this is perfect. It's about time that he showed him a lesson for the way he treated him. Deku saying that it's really alright as he would stare at the glare of Bakugo, who was ice cold and serious, clearly preparing himself for this fight to come. So as Izuku, as stiff as ever, would walk towards Uraraka, this is when she would ask, "Is there any reason why that boy seems to hate you so much?" Deku saying that that's his childhood friend, now turned bully, Katsuki Bakugo. Uraraka being shocked, going, "What? You have bullies? With a quirk like that? I can't believe it. You should be able to show him who's who." Steel in Deku's head just going, "That's what I'm saying!" All the while Deku would give a nervous chuckle, and Uraraka would say, "Well, don't worry. Today, we're gonna beat him." And ladies and gentlemen, that's where I'm gonna be ending part 1 for What If Deku was Max Steel. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I have been wanting to make this video ever since I first thought of starting a YouTube page. Like, actually, this is one of those what ifs that I've always wanted to make, but judging by me not knowing how much support it would or wouldn't get, I've always been a little afraid to do it. But seeing as I finally took the opportunity, I really hope a lot of you guys like this video, leave a comment, and just do all that usual YouTube stuff to help it do well, because I'm really excited to continue this, and I hope you guys are as much as I am. But with no further ado, if you guys are going to be wanting a part 2 to this series, then smash 1,000 likes, and with nothing else to say, I'll see y'all in the next one.